Alright, imagine I'm standing right in front of you, maybe on a small stage, maybe just sitting with a microphone in a quiet room, and I'm asking to talk to you. Not at you, not giving a lecture, just a conversations. Even though I'm the one doing most of the talking. This is for anyone who has put in years of study, walked across a stage, taken a diploma home, and then sat in their room wondering why they still feel completely directionless. If that's you even a little bit, I hope something in here lands. I want to take you through 4 years of my life. I studied international trade law. I don't say that to impress you. I say it because the subject itself is part of the problem. It's one of those fields that sounds like it should come with a built in plan. The name alone suggests a trajectory. Global commerce, cross borders, deal, international disputes. It all sounds very certain. And when I started, that certainty was exactly what I wanted. You know how it is when you are 18, right? You have just finished high school. The world is asking you to pick a lane, and you do your best to pick one that seems respectable and interesting enough. You imagine yourself in a few years wearing the right clothes, walking into the right buildings, knowing the right people. I had that image clearly. I had been someone who understood the machinery behind international business. I had been the person in the room who could explain that was allowed and what wasn't. My parents were proud, and I was proud of myself. That initial pride carried me through the few first semester. Everything was new, everything felt like it was building towards something. The textbooks were thick, the professors were serious, and I took it all very seriously. But here, what I didn't notice at first as the semester rolled on, the content became more and more abstract. We studied conventions and model laws. We picked apart famous rulings. We argued hypothetical scenarios in class. That's all good training for the mind, but the problem was that while I was getting better at thinking like a lawyer in theory, I had almost no sense of what a lawyer in this field actually did from 9 to 5. I couldn't picture the desk, the screen, the phone calls, the emails. I couldn't tell you about the force major clauses in dispute resolution mechanisms. But I couldn't tell you what a typical Tuesday looked like for someone working in trade compliances. Eventually, I started talking to people who were already working. A friend of mine got in a internship at a small export company. I expect her to come back with stories that matches our case studies. Instead, she talked about verifying shipping documents, chasing missing signatures, and trying to figure out why a container was being held at a port in another country because of a form she had never heard before. And this is a real work. And it's had almost no overlapping with the intellectual debates that we were having in class. That strange realizations to sit with, and you spend years being trained to operate at a certain altitude, and then you discover that entry level works happens much closer to the ground. It's not that the theory is useless, it's that nobody prepared you for the distance between the theory and the daily practice. You end up feeling simultaneously overeducated and underprepared. You have the vocabulary of an expert, but the practical skills of a beginner. And if you're not careful, that gap started to feel like a personal failure instead of what it actually is, a design flaw in how we educated people for professional life. Yet the gaps between study and works it's only one piece of it. There's another piece that I think gets even less discussion. It's what happens when you look around at your peers and start comparing your insides to their outsides. I did this constantly. I still catch myself doing it now. Social media makes it impossible to avoid. Someone posts about scholarship abroad, someone else announced an internship at a big firm. Another person quietly update their LinkedIn with a certifications you didn't even know existed. And you look at your own situation, which probably involve a lot of ordinary days, a lot of quiet uncertainties, and you conclude that you are falling behind. I know the argument. People who post the highlights. Behind every announcement, there are probably a lot of stress, confusions, and messes that never get shown. I know that rationally, but the emotional brain doesn't care about that logic. It just registers the gap between their visible progress and your invisible stagnation. And after 4 years of these micro comparisons, the accumulated weight is significant. I can convince you that everyone else found their path while you were wandering around in the dark. That impressions sticks even when you know intellectually that is can't possibly be true for anyone. I once sat down with a friend who seemed from the outside to have it all figured out. She she had secured a prestigious internship. Her social media was a stream of professional milestones, and one evening over a drink, she told me that she was deeply unsure about whether she even liked the field. She had spent years chasing approval and external validations, and she was only starting to realize that the approval had been covering up a lack of genuine interest. That conversations didn't fix anything for me, but it did crack the illusion. It reminded me that the image that people project is often a careful construction, not a transparent window into their inner life. Then there's the third layer. Beneath the practical concern about jobs and the social concern about status, there are the questions that come late at night when you have nothing left to distract you. Why did I choose this in the first place? Was it my decisions or was I steered into it by family expectations, by social pressures, by a vague sense of what a good career looks like? Do I actually care about the content of this field or was I just attracted to that idea of being the kind of person who works in it? If I walked away, what would I do instead? And if I can't answer that, does that mean I have no real identity? These are not questions that a curriculum can answer. They are not even questions that have fixed answers. They are the kind of question that can follow you for years if you let them. And in the absence of honest conversations about them, it's easy to feel that you are the only one who doesn't have it sorted out. I did a lot of research during this period. I don't mean legal research, I mean the kind of research you do when you're trying to understand yourself. Psychology, philosophy, and biography. I came across the idea that the period of about 18 to 25 is what some psychologists call emerging adulthood. It's a distinct phase of life where you're no longer a teenager, but not yet fully settled into adult roles. It's marked by exploration, instability, self focus, and a whole lot of feeling in between. What struck me most about this idea was that it normalized my experience. All the uncertainty, the shifting plans, the changing self image. These weren't symptoms of something wrong. They were features of the development stage I was in. The problem wasn't that I was lost. The problem was that I thought I wasn't supposed to be. But understanding that intellectually is one thing, living through it is another. There were plenty of days when I woke up and felt kind of a low level dread, not panic, just a quiet heaviness. The feeling that time was passing and I wasn't accumulating the right kind of progress. I sit in front of my PC, look at the job listing, and feel a wave of exhaustions before I apply to anything. I would think about the future and just see fog. Not darkness, but just fog. And fog is undirectional because you can't see far enough to know whether you're heading towards something or away from it. What slowly started to help, very slowly, was letting go of the demand that I figured everything out in advance. I had been treating my career like a math problem with a single correct solution. I thought that if I just thought hard enough, I would uncover the one thing that I meant to do, when that's not just how most people find their way. More often than not, directions emerges from actions. Like when you try something, you learn from it and you adjust. You meet someone who introduced you to a path you didn't know existed. You took a job that wasn't your dream job, but it still teaches you something about what you're good at and what drains you. That iterative process is so much more messier than the linear story that we sold, but it's also more realistic. I wrote more, not because I want to become a writer, but because writing helped me to clarify what I thought. I asked older people about their career histories and I made a point of listening to the detours, not just the destinations. One thing have heard repeatedly was that the first job after university rarely defines the rest of your life. In fact, for a lot of people, the first few years after graduations are a period of experimentations. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to try something and just leave it. That permissions is rarely stated explicitly. So a lot of us act if the first decisions is kind of permanent, and as pressure can be paralyzing. I also had to rethink what my degree actually meant. I had been treating it as a label that determined my identity. I was a law graduate, so I had to do law. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that a degree is not a life sentence. It's a set of skills and a way of thinking. I can analyze complex informations, I can construct an argument, I can read dense material and extract what matters. I understand something about how international system interact, and those abilities don't disappear if I work outside a traditional legal roles. they just get applied differently. These reframing took a lot of weight off. It doesn't mean that I wasn't trapped. It meant that the years of study still had value, and even if my path didn't follow the standard script. Now, I want to pause here and acknowledge something. I know that some of you listening might be thinking that easy for you to say. You have a degree, you have options, and maybe that's fair. There are real constraints in the world: financial pressures, family obligations, limited job markets. I'm not saying that everything is purely a matter of mindsets. What I am saying is that the internal pressures we put on ourselves often make those external constraints feel even heavier than they are. If you can at least release the idea you are supposed to have it all figured out by 22, you would free up a lot of energy that being spent on self-criticism. And that energy can go into actually exploring your options instead of just worrying about them. I also want to say something to those who might be watching family member or friends go through this. If you truly care about has just graduated or seem adrift, understand that they are probably already putting more pressures on themselves than you ever could. What they likely need is not another reminder of the clock is ticking, but some space to figure it out. They need to know that their worth is not tied to how quickly they land a good job. They need to know that it's okay to take a non-linear path, and that kind of support can make a huge difference. Now, back to my own story. By the time I reached the end of my fourth year, I still didn't have a clear answer to the question, what am I going to do? I had some ideas, some tentative directions, but nothing locked in. And I had to make a choice. I could either saying that as a failure of my educations, or I could just accept it at a starting point of the next phase. So I chose the later. Not because it was easy, but because the alternative, perpetual disappointment in myself, was exhausting and unproductive. I started telling people the truth when they asked about myself, instead of giving a polished answers designed to impress. I said something like, I am still figuring it out. I have a few things that I'm exploring. Some people seem uncomfortable with that honesty, but many others, more than I expected, respond with a relief that admit that they felt the same way or they had felt that way for years. That honesty create connections that the polished answers never did. So here's where I land, and this is for you if you are in that fog right now. The 4 years of university were not a straight road to a predetermined destination. They were a landscape. Some parts are interesting and some were dull. Some felt irrelevant. Some planted seeds I may not see grow for years. If you measure the experience only by whether it gave you a clear career path, you might conclude it fell short. But if you think about what you actually learn, not just fact, but how to think, how to manage your time, how to deal with difficult people, how to persist through things that you don't enjoy, those are real gains, even if they don't fit neatly onto a CV. And the feeling of being lost, it isn't a permanent condition. It's a signal. It's telling you that the old map no longer applies and you haven't drawn a new one yet. That's an uncomfortable place to be, but It's also a creative place. It's where you get asked questions you ignored when you were just following the track. What do I actually want in my days to look like? What kind of work feel meaningful to me? What am I willing to struggle through? And what drains me to the point of burnout? These are not luxury questions. They are foundation of a sustainable life. One final thing. If you're watching this and you are in middle of the lost, please don't isolate yourself. Find people you can be honest with. Find communities online or offline where people talk about the messy part of early adulthood without pretending. The more you talk about it, the more you realize that how many people are right there with you. And that recognitions by itself can reduce the shame. It can turn what felt like a private failure into a shared human experience. I'm not going to end this with a neat bow. I don't have a success story to sell you. What I have is a process that I'm still in. And I'm sitting here telling about it because I think there's value in naming the thing. 4 years of university, a degree in hand, is still no clear direction. It's not a scandal. It's not a tragedy. It's a common feature of this stage of life, and it deserves more honest airtime than it gets. So, thank you for watching, for listening, for sitting with this. I hope something in here gave you a bit of space to breathe, and I hope that wherever you go next, you will give yourself permissions to take the time you need. You are not late, you are just early in the next chapter.